They say love at first sight is not actually real love. That it is just infatuation dressed up in good lighting and a racing heartbeat. People say you cannot fall in love with someone before you even know their voice, their laugh, the way they argue, or the way they go quiet when something is bothering them and they do not want to talk about it yet. People say a lot of things. Kwon Hyuk knew all of those things too, and he had decided, at the age of 17, that every single one of them was wrong. He remembered the exact moment. A Tuesday in October. The weather was stormy, rain clouds forming in the sky and a cool breeze whooshing around. It was the kind of October that made you feel nostalgic, like you remembered your high school days even when you were still living them. He had been sitting in his usual seat at the back, third row from the window, because sitting by the window gave people the impression that you were the type of boy who stared dreamily into the distance, and Kwon Hyuk was not that. He was the type who sat where he could see everything without making it obvious that he was watching. He was good at that. Watching. The classroom door opened, and the homeroom teacher walked in with a girl Kwon had never seen before. She did not make an entrance the way some people do, all shoulders and noise, and the kind of energy that demands attention before a single word is spoken. She just walked in, looked at the room with calm, dark eyes,
introduce yourself.
and said her name clearly
Hi, everyone.
when the teacher
I'm
asked
Stella,
her to
a transfer
introduce
student
herself.
from Toronto.
Stella Beatrice. Transfer student from Toronto. She pronounced it with a slight Canadian lilt on the vowels that she probably did not even notice herself. She found an empty seat 2 rows ahead of Kwon and sat down, pulling a notebook from her bag with a kind of unhurried ease that told him she was not nervous, just careful. She looked around once, not to seek approval, but the way someone looks around a new place when they are simply taking inventory of where they have landed. And that was it. That was the exact moment Kwon Hyuk, the son of one of the most exquisite business families in Seoul, the boy who had been taught since childhood that feelings were distractions and that the only emotion worth investing in was discipline, felt something bloom in his stomach so suddenly and completely that he spent the rest of that class wondering if something was physically wrong with him. Nothing was wrong with him. He was just in love. At 17. With a girl who did not know he existed. She was extremely beautiful. Brown skin, brown eyes, and nothing like he had ever seen before. The thing about being Kwon Hyuk was that his whole life had been decided before he was old enough to have opinions about it. His father, Kwon Sung-jin, had the kind of presence that rearranged the air in a room when he walked in. He was not cruel in the obvious way. He did not raise his voice often. He simply stated things, and the things he stated became facts because no one in his orbit had ever successfully argued otherwise. By the time Hyuk was 12, his father had already mapped out the architecture of his future. Finish high school at the top of his class. Business degree at Harvard. Back in Seoul by 21. Married to the daughter of Senator Park, a match that had been quietly discussed between the two families for years before either Hyuk or the senator's daughter, Yoon Chan, were old enough to understand what an arranged marriage actually meant. Hyuk had known about Chan the way you know about a scheduled dentist appointment far in the future. It was coming. It was going to happen. There was not much point in thinking about it too hard until it arrived. And then Stella Beatrice walked into his classroom. He did not talk to her. He came close once, in the second week of October, when she dropped her pen in the hallway and he picked it up before she even registered that it had fallen. He held it out, and she looked at him, really looked at him, the way people rarely did, because most people looked at him and saw the Kwon family name hanging around his neck like a plaque, and she said, "Oh, thank you," in that Canadian lilt voice, and took the pen back and kept walking. His heart did something that scared him terribly. That was the longest conversation they ever had. He watched her instead. He watched her figure out the school's social ecosystem with a kind of quiet intelligence, not performing for anyone, not chasing popularity, just existing on her own terms until the right people found their way to her. And they did, because that was what happened with people who were genuinely themselves. The right people always found them. He watched her laugh at things that actually deserved laughter and not at things that did not. He watched her get a boyfriend by November, a boy named Daewoo from the year above, and for the first time he felt jealousy. He watched her receive the highest grade in their shared literature class on a paper about inherited identity and never once act like it was a big deal. He watched her on the last day of school before graduation, standing outside with her family, her mother, her younger sister, a man who must have been her father, all of them laughing at something, taking photographs. The sister jumping on Stella's back like a child even though she could not have been more than 4 years younger, and Stella catching her without even flinching. He watched all of it from the back seat of his father's car as the driver pulled slowly out of the school grounds. He told himself at the last second to stop looking, and then he told himself the opposite. He turned and looked at her through the rear window, through the narrow gap between the buildings, just as the car rounded the corner. She did not look back. He had spent a long time wondering, in the years that followed, whether she would have, if the car had slowed down just a little more.
Welcome back to Afro-Korean Blooming Love Stories, where I script original Afro-Korean stories of love and healing. I am Naomi, the writer of today's story. I would love it, babes, if you do me a favor by liking the video and subscribing to this channel. Now let's begin.
10 years was a long time. Long enough that Kwon Hyuk had done everything his father planned for him and more. Harvard, done. The business degree, done. Back in Seoul at 21, done. Running the Seoul and Hong Kong divisions of Kwon International by 24, done. Every milestone, every benchmark, every objective on the map his father had drawn, checked off with the same quiet efficiency that had defined his entire life. The one thing left on the list was Chan. The wedding had been set for April. It was now March. He had managed, through a combination of international travel schedules and strategic scheduling conflicts, to delay the formal engagement ceremony twice in the past 2 years. His father knew what he was doing. His mother pretended not to notice. Chan herself did not seem particularly invested in his timeline, which was either convenient or quietly devastating, depending on how you chose to look at it. She had her own life, her own circle, her own idea of what this marriage was supposed to give her, and romantic love was not at the top of her list. She had told him that herself once, at a dinner they had been quietly arranged to attend together. "Let's be honest," she had said, swirling her glass. "This is a merger, not a fairy tale." "I'm fine with that if you are." She had looked at him with the expectation that he would look relieved. He had not been relieved. But he had said yes, he was fine with it, because saying anything else would have required him to explain things he had never said out loud to anyone. And so it stood. April. The wedding of the year. His father had already called 3 journalists. Hyuk was in Jeju Island for a cousin's wedding in early March, a distant cousin, the son of his father's youngest brother. Marrying a woman the family had not fully approved of, but could not actively oppose without creating the kind of scene that would end up on the internet. He had not particularly wanted to attend. Cousin weddings were their own kind of performance, everyone dressing up and saying the right things and keeping score in ways that had nothing to do with celebrating 2 people. But he had gone, because not going would have required a better excuse than the one he had. The wedding was held at a hotel on the southern coast of Jeju, the kind of venue where everything was either stone or glass or the sea. Hyuk stood to the left of the main ballroom doors during the reception, a glass of sparkling water in his hand, watching the room with the practiced stillness of someone who had spent years learning how to exist in crowded spaces without actually being in them. He was not looking for anyone. He was not waiting for anything. He was simply counting down the hours until it was acceptable to leave. And then he saw her. She was across the room, near the table with the flower arrangements that were taller than she was, standing with 2 other women and a man who kept saying something that made all 3 of them laugh. She was in a deep green dress, the color of the sea in winter, and her hair was up, and she was laughing at whatever the man had said with her whole face, the way she used to laugh back in that classroom when something actually deserved it. Kwon Hyuk's glass of sparkling water almost went to the floor. He caught it. He was good at not dropping things. He stood very still for a moment, the way you stand still when you are not sure if what you are seeing is real and you do not want to move in case it disappears. And then she turned, just slightly, reaching for a glass on the table, and he saw her face properly for the first time in 10 years. Stella Beatrice. She had changed and she had not changed. The bones of her face were exactly as he remembered, the strong jaw, the wide-set eyes, the set of her mouth that managed to look both serious and warm at the same time. But she was different the way people are different when they have spent 10 years becoming the full version of themselves. She stood like someone who knew what rooms she belonged in and had stopped asking for permission to be in them. Hyuk did not know how long he stood there before the man next to him, his cousin's best friend, said, "You look like you've seen a ghost," and laughed. Hyuk said, "I'm fine," and looked away. He lasted 6 more minutes before he quietly excused himself from the group he had been standing near and made his way, with no particular haste, toward the far side of the room. He was not going to go up to her. He had no intention of going up to her. He was simply migrating to a different part of the room, which happened to be a part of the room where there was a clear line of sight to the table near the tall flower arrangements. He stood with his back partially to a pillar and his face angled toward the window and told himself to stop it. He did not stop it. She glanced over, not at him specifically, but in the general direction of the window, and then her eyes moved past him, and then they came back. He saw the exact moment she registered something. Her head tilted, very slightly. The laughter in her face settled into something more careful, the way expressions do when a memory you cannot fully place tugs at the edges of recognition. And then one of her friends said something and she looked away. Hyuk let out a breath so slow and controlled that no one standing near him would have known he was doing it on purpose. He was going to leave. Right now. He was going to set down his glass and walk to the exit and get into his car and drive back to the hotel, and that would be the end of it. Kwon Hyuk. Her voice was the same. The Canadian lilt vowels were still there, softened a little by what sounded like years in a place where people spoke differently, but still hers. Still exactly the way it had sounded the day she took her pen back from him in the hallway and said, "Oh, thank you." He turned around. She was standing 4 feet away from him, and she looked like she was not completely sure she had made the right decision to say his name out loud. She had her glass in one hand and her bag strapped over her shoulder, and she was looking at him with those calm, dark eyes that had always seen too clearly for someone who did not know she was being watched. "I thought that was you," she said. "You and Asungo High, right? Class of 2015, he said. "Yes." She looked at him for a second longer than strictly necessary. "Stella Beatrice. I was a transfer in my senior year. I don't know if you remember." "I remember," he said. She blinked. And then the corner of her mouth turned up, just slightly. "Okay, that's really honest." "I'm generally honest," he said. She laughed. Not the full version of the laugh from across the room, but a smaller, warmer one. "Fair enough." She looked at him. "What are you doing here?" "My cousin's wedding." Kong Junho. Her eyes widened slightly. "You're serious." "I'm here for the bride. Minji is my colleague." It took him a moment. "You work in Seoul?" "I work everywhere," she said. "I'm a lawyer. But my firm has a Seoul office, so I spend a few months a year here. I've been based here for about 6 months this time." She said it with the matter-of-fact ease of someone who had gotten very comfortable with the word lawyer in the years since high school. It suited her completely. He could not have been more unsurprised. "Congratulations," he said. "On the career." She tilted her head. "Thank you. What about you?" "Business," he said. "Kwon International." She processed that for exactly the amount of time it took to connect the name to the company, and then she said, with admirable composure, "Right. That's yes. That tracks." And then she laughed again, shaking her head slightly. "Small world." "Very small," he agreed. They stood in a brief silence that was not uncomfortable in the way it probably should have been, given that they were 2 people who had spent exactly 1 hallway interaction together in their shared history. But it was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that settles between people who are both careful with words and therefore do not mind the absence of them. Her friend appeared at her elbow, the funny one, the man from earlier, shorter than Stella by 2 inches and with the kind of face that looked permanently on the verge of saying something either very clever or very ridiculous. Stella. Minji is looking for O. Hello. He looked at Kwon with open, curious eyes. Who are you? Hyuk, Kwon said. Tund, the man said, extending a hand immediately. I'm Stella's best friend, which means if you're about to ask for her number, you're going through me first. Tund, Stella said flatly. Just being thorough, he said cheerfully. He looked between the two of them. Am I interrupting something? No, Stella said. Yes, Hyuk said, at exactly the same time. Tund looked delighted. Right. He made a vague backward gesture and disappeared, which was impressive given how quickly he moved. Stella stared at the empty space where he had been standing, and then looked at Kwon. Did you just? He asked, Hyuk said. She looked at him for a long moment. And then she pressed her lips together, very firmly, in the way people do when they are trying not to smile and losing. You're very direct. I told you. I'm honest. There's a difference, she said. Not much of one, he said. She tilted her head again, studying him with those clear eyes. Are you always like this? Like what? She gestured at him vaguely with her glass, as if the gesture said everything that needed saying. Maybe it did. He did not ask her to clarify. I'm going to go find Minji, she said, after another moment. But it was good to see you, Kwon Hyuk. She said his full name the way Koreans did, surname first, but with the Canadian vowels still wrapped around the syllables in a way that made it sound unlike anyone else saying it. It was good to see you too, Stella Beatrice, he said. She walked away. He watched her go, and the feeling that had settled into his chest at 17 years old, the one he had spent a decade carefully not thinking about, unpacked itself and made itself at home as if it had never left. Tund spent the entire drive back to the hotel asking questions that Stella refused to answer properly. Who is he said, for the 4th time. Someone I went to school with, she said, for the 4th time. You went to school in Seoul for 1 year, he said. And I have never once, in the 7 years I have known you, heard you mention anyone from that year by name. Not one person. And this man says hello, and you look like, he paused, searching for the word. I don't look like anything, she said. You looked like someone pressed pause on you, he said triumphantly. For about 4 seconds. Which for you is an eternity. Stella looked out the window at the dark coastline. The water was catching the light from the hotel in the distance. Go to sleep, Tund. It's 9:15. Then read something. I'm too interested in your facial expressions to read. She turned and looked at him. He was grinning, the way he always grinned when he knew he was right and was waiting patiently for her to catch up. She had known Tund Adeyemi for 7 years, since they were both junior associates at the same law firm in Toronto, and she had never once managed to successfully lie to him about anything. Not for lack of trying. He was just someone I noticed in school, she said. And before you say anything noticed. That's it. He was quiet, and he always seemed to know things, and I was 17 and in a new country, and I noticed him the way you notice people who seem like they're running at a different frequency than everyone else. Tund was quiet for approximately 3 seconds. You had a crush on him. I was 17, she said. That is not a no. She looked back out the window. Drop it. He dropped it. But she knew from the quality of his silence, the satisfied, settled kind, that he had filed the whole conversation away in whatever internal archive he kept for information he would bring up at the worst possible moment. She had, in fact, noticed Kwon Hyuk at 17. She had noticed him in the detached, observational way that she noticed most things, which was to say she was aware of him without letting the awareness become anything she needed to examine. He was quiet. He was watchful. He had the kind of stillness that felt chosen rather than natural, the stillness of someone who had decided, deliberately, to be less than what he was in public spaces. She had thought about him once or twice, in the abstract way you think about interesting people you will probably never speak to, and then she had gone home to Canada and started law school and not thought about him again. Or mostly not. There had been a very specific moment, in the weeks before she left Seoul on graduation day, when she had been standing with her family outside the school and she had felt, for no reason she could rationally explain, the specific sensation of being watched. She had looked around, at the other families, at the students, at the cars pulling out of the front gates. She had not seen anything. The feeling had stayed for a moment longer and then dissolved. She had thought about it occasionally. Not often, but occasionally. She was thinking about it now, which was her own business, and Tund was not going to find out about it. Minji's wedding was the next morning, and it was beautiful, and Stella cried for approximately 40 seconds during the vows and then composed herself, because she was a professional and also because Tund had bet her $50 she would make it through without crying, and she had absolutely not planned on losing. She lost $50. The reception afterwards was in the same hotel's garden, which had been strung with lights and smelled like wisteria, and the food was excellent, and Stella was genuinely happy for Minji, who deserved every good thing and had somehow found a man who knew it. She did not look for Kwon Hyuk. She was not looking for him. But she knew, at some point in the evening, that he was somewhere in the garden, because she felt it in the same inexplicable way she had felt it on that last day of school. She thought, very briefly, that she was probably losing her mind, and then one of Minji's aunts grabbed her arm and started talking about the buffet, and the moment dissolved. She was at the dessert table 15 minutes before the end of the reception when he appeared at the other end of it. He was with two other men, relatives by the look of it, and he was half listening to whatever they were saying and half watching the garden with that same expression from the night before, present but not quite there. Like most of his attention was being allocated elsewhere. And then he turned and looked directly at her. She raised an eyebrow. The corner of his mouth moved. Very slightly. Just enough to be visible. She looked back at the dessert table and spent entirely too long deciding between two identical options. When she looked up again, he was walking toward her. "You're at a dessert table looking that serious," he said, stopping a few feet away. "What are you actually thinking about?" "Injialmi versus Tiok," she said, without missing a beat. He looked at the two plates she was holding. "Take both." "I'm not going to take both." "Why not?" She looked at him. "Because I don't need both." "Need and want aren't the same," he said. She set down the injialmi. "Tiok," she said. He reached past her and picked up the injialmi plate and held it out. "For the record," he said, "I think you made the wrong choice." She looked at the plate. She took it. "If I agreed with you this fast," she said, "that would be embarrassing." "I'd keep it between us," he said. She ate the injialmi. It was, objectively, the better option. She did not tell him that. They stood at the dessert table for 37 minutes, which Stella later calculated because she had checked her watch when he appeared and again when Tund emerged from somewhere and gave her a look across the garden that was so dramatically significant it practically had subtitles. She excused herself before Tund could get closer because there was absolutely no telling what would come out of his mouth. She did not give Kwon Hyuk her number that night, but he gave her his card. He did it at the end, simply and without ceremony, took a card from his jacket pocket and set it on the table next to her plate and said, "In case you're ever in Seoul and you want to argue about food again." She looked at the card. She looked at him. She picked up the card. "No promises," she said. "That's fine," he said. "I'm patient." She thought about that for a very long time on the flight back to Seoul. She did not call for 3 weeks. In her defense, she had a case. A significant one involving an international shipping company and a contract dispute that had turned into something considerably more complicated than the original brief suggested. She worked 17-hour days for 2 of those 3 weeks and slept in her office once, which Tund discovered when he arrived at 7 in the morning and found her face down on her keyboard with a red indentation across her cheek. "You need to go home," he said. "I need to win this case," she said. You're going to win it looking like a keyboard stamped you in the face? She went home. The case settled in the client's favor in week 3, and Stella went out with her friends to celebrate at a restaurant that had a waiting list and whose food was worth every week of it. There were 6 of them, Tund, 2 of her female colleagues from the Seoul office, a law school friend who was in the city for a conference, and Nadia, who had been her flatmate in law school and who had the gift of turning any gathering into something worth attending. It was at this dinner, somewhere between the 2nd course and the 3rd, that Stella went to her bag for her phone and found Kwon Hyuk's card tucked behind it. She stared at it for longer than the situation required. "What's that?" said Tund, from directly beside her. "Nothing," she said, putting it away. "It looked like a business card," he said. "You need to stop watching me so closely," she said. "I can't help it, you're interesting." He paused. "Is that his card?" She said nothing. He said, "Stella." She said, "The food is here." He said, "It literally is not." The food arrived. She ate her first course with the focused attention of someone who was absolutely, completely not thinking about a business card. She texted Kwon Hyuk at 11:30 that night, sitting on her bathroom floor with her shoes off, because for reasons she could not fully explain, the bathroom felt like the right place for it. Not the living room. Not the bedroom. The bathroom, with its honest mirror and its tiles, and its lack of ambient lighting that might make any decision feel softer than it actually was. She typed, "This is Stella Beatrice. We were at the same wedding in Jeju 3 weeks ago. You left your card." She sent it before she could think about it too hard. He replied in 4 minutes. "I know who this is. How is the case?" She stared at the screen. He knew she had been on a case. She had not told him she was on a case. She had not spoken to him since Jeju. She typed, "How do you know about the case?" He replied, "Yoon and Park versus Pacific Maritime Holdings. It was in the legal section of 3 publications. Your name was mentioned." She thought about this. She typed, "You read the legal section of publications?" He replied, "I read everything that's printed." She sat on her bathroom floor for a moment, holding her phone. She typed, "The case settled well." He replied, "I know. Congratulations." She typed, "You're going to tell me you already knew that too, aren't you?" He replied, "Yes." She pressed her lips together. Against her will, she was smiling. She could feel it, and it was deeply inconvenient. She typed, "Good night, Kwon Hyuk." He replied, "Good night, Stella Beatrice." She got up off the bathroom floor and went to bed and did not sleep for another hour. They texted. Not constantly, not in the breathless, continuous way that made people check their phones every 30 seconds, but with the specific rhythm of 2 people who had things to say and chose their moments. He would send her something in the early morning, an observation, a question, occasionally a link to something he had read and thought she would have opinions about, which she always did. She would reply in the evening, or sometimes in the middle of the day when she was waiting for a call. They did not talk about what they were doing. They just did it. Tun noticed, because Tun noticed everything. "You're smiling at your phone again," he said, one afternoon, not looking up from his own work. "I smile," Stella said. "Not at your phone. Not like that." He looked up. "Is it him?" She put her phone face down on the desk. "That's a yes," Tun said. "I'm going to get you a hobby," she said. "Something time-consuming. Woodworking. Pottery." "I already have a hobby," he said. "It's watching your life like a drama." She threw a pen at him. He caught it. The texting turned into a phone call, one night in late March, when she was stuck in traffic and called him on a whim that she could not entirely explain. And he picked up on the second ring in the way that suggested he had not been waiting for it, but had not been far from his phone either. They talked for 40 minutes. She was home by the time they finished, and she sat in her parked car for the last 10 minutes rather than interrupt the conversation by going inside. The next call she initiated. And the one after that, he did. Tund was insufferably smug about all of it. "This is a situation," he said. "It's not a situation," she said. "We're talking. People talk." He said. "Stop," she said. "I will stop," he said, "when you admit that something is happening." Nothing is happening, she said. She was not, strictly speaking, telling the truth. What she did not know, what she had no way of knowing, because it was the kind of thing that did not make the legal publications, was that Kwon Hyuk had a wedding scheduled for April. That the announcement had been drafted. That his father had called those journalists. That somewhere in the city, a woman named Park Chae-in was having dress fittings that she approached the way she approached everything, with precise attention to logistics and minimal emotional investment. What she also did not know was that Kwon Hyuk had, in the weeks since Jeju, told his father he needed more time. His father had not said anything immediately. That was the thing about Kwon Sung-jin, the silence was never comfortable. It was the silence of a man assembling a response that would land exactly where he intended it to land. More time, his father had said, eventually, is not something we have. I'm asking for 2 months, Hyuk said. You are asking for a reason to not do this, his father said. The reason is irrelevant. The decision is not. Hyuk had said nothing else that night, but he had not backed down either. And that, for someone who had spent his entire life executing his father's plans with clean efficiency, was something his father would notice. April arrived the way April always does in Seoul, all at once, the cherry blossoms going up overnight so that the city looked like it had been repainted while everyone was sleeping. Stella had always found this unreasonably moving, the way the city transformed so completely in a matter of days, and she had lived in enough places to know that Seoul did it better than almost anywhere. She was walking back from a late meeting when her phone rang. Not Hyuk. Nadia, who had extended her visit and was staying in Stella's spare room, and who called with an energy that suggested either emergency or excitement, and with Nadia those two things often looked the same. There's a thing, Nadia said. What kind of thing, Stella said. The fun kind. Tund found a bowling alley. Tund found a bowling alley, Stella repeated. It has an arcade section. And you're not allowed to say no because we already reserved lanes and you're already on the list. I'm on a list for a bowling alley? You're on the list, Nadia confirmed. 7 o'clock. Dress casual. Stella looked at the sky, which was still pink at the edges from the sunset. She thought about her apartment and her couch and the work she had been planning to do that evening. Fine, she said. You're the best, Nadia said. I know, Stella said. She almost did not text Hyuk about it. She typed it and deleted it twice, which was unusual for her because she was not generally a person who typed and deleted things. She decided the issue was that she was not sure what she was inviting him to exactly, because they had not actually been anywhere together, and a bowling alley with her friends was a thing with certain implications, and she was not ready to have the conversation about what those implications were. She texted him anyway. She typed, "My friends have commandeered my evening. Bowling, apparently. This is not an invitation, but I thought you should know this is what some people do on a Thursday." He replied in under a minute, "Is that an invitation?" She replied, "I said it wasn't." He replied, "You also mentioned it unprompted." She held her phone and looked at the cherry blossoms on the street she was passing. She replied, 7 o'clock. Tund knows the address. Then she put her phone in her bag and walked the rest of the way home at a slightly faster pace than strictly necessary. He arrived at 7:12, which was close enough to on time that Stella did not comment on it, and he was wearing dark jeans and a plain black jacket with a cap pulled low over his face, which Nadia immediately pointed out in a whisper that was not quiet enough. "Is he incognito?" Nadia said. "He's recognizable," Stella said, at a normal volume, because she had decided that normalcy was the correct strategy for the evening. "From what?" Nadia said. "From being Kwon Hyuk," Tund supplied helpfully. Nadia looked at Tund. Tund looked at Stella. Stella looked at Hyuk, who had approached close enough to hear all of this, and whose expression had not changed at all, which she was beginning to understand was his version of amusement. "Nice cap," she said. "It's functional," he said. "It's a disguise," she said. "It's a cap," he said. Tund made a sound that was technically a cough. They bowled. Stella was, to her own mild embarrassment, not particularly good at bowling, which she attributed to the angles, because she was precise about angles professionally and the angles of bowling were different from the angles she was used to. Tund was very good at bowling, which he had never mentioned to her in 7 years of friendship, and which she told him was a betrayal. Nadia bowled with the wild abandon of someone who had given up on accuracy and was simply having fun, which turned out to be surprisingly effective. Hyuk bowled with the same focused quiet he applied to everything and was, without any visible effort, better than all of them. "Of course you are," Stella said, the 4th time he knocked all the pins down. "I've bowled before," he said. "I've bowled before too," she said. "That doesn't explain whatever this is." "Good form," he said. "You're overthinking it. You're treating it like a legal argument." She looked at him. She stopped. "That's actually not wrong. Bowl like you're doing it for fun," he said. "I am doing it for fun," she said. "You're doing it to succeed," he said. "Those aren't the same thing." She picked up the ball. She thought about what he said, in the way she thought about things she would not admit aloud to considering. She rolled. 6 pins. "Progress," he said. "Don't patronize me," she said. "I'm not," he said. "Last round you got 4. She looked at him. He looked back at her, entirely straight-faced, except for that almost invisible thing that happened at the corner of his mouth when he was saying something that had more going on underneath it than the words suggested. They moved to the arcade section at 9, when Tun declared that bowling was finished and that the arcade had a claw machine that had his name on it. The claw machine did not, in fact, have his name on it. It had, on the current occupant, a small plush penguin that Tun spent 12 attempts and an undisclosed amount of money pursuing before he finally extracted it from the machine and held it up with the triumph of someone who had won a court case. "For Nadia," he announced. "Oh," said Nadia, who looked genuinely touched. "Tund. Don't make it a thing," he said, handing it to her. She made it a thing. He let her. Stella and Hyuk ended up at the racing game at the far end of the arcade, which Stella had not planned and which had happened because the racing game was the only machine with 2 seats and Tund had steered her toward it with all the subtlety of a redirect in cross-examination. "Your friend is very transparent," Hyuk said. "He would say he's very efficient," Stella said, sitting down. "Both things can be true," Hyuk said, sitting next to her. They raced. He won the first round. She won the second by a margin that she was fairly sure involved something she had noticed about his steering pattern and which she absolutely exploited. He looked at her after the second race with an expression that was as close to impressed as she had seen from him. "You studied how I was driving," he said. "I'm a lawyer," she said. "I study everything." "Even this," he said, gesturing at the screen. "Especially this," she said, "when I'm losing." He laughed. A real one, not the small, contained version she had heard a few times before, but an actual laugh, and it was so unexpected and so genuine that Stella felt it somewhere in her sternum before she could redirect the feeling. She looked at the screen. "Another round?" "Another round," he confirmed. They walked back to her apartment building at 11, because the bowling alley was 4 blocks away, and the evening had been mild enough that no one had objected to the walk. Tund had Nadia's penguin under his arm and was telling a story about a case he had worked on before Seoul that had gone so catastrophically sideways that it was now funny in retrospect. Nadia was laughing. The other friends had gone their separate directions from the bowling alley. Stella walked beside Hyuk, who was half listening to Tun's story and half watching the street with the quiet attention he always had. "You had fun," she said. She said it like a statement rather than a question, because she had been watching him all evening and she was fairly confident it was true. "Yes," he said. "Good," she said. He looked at her. "Did you?" "I won a race against someone who clearly doesn't lose very often," she said. "Yes. You exploited my patterns," he said. "That's called strategy," she said. He looked at her for a moment. "You're very good at people," he said. "Seeing them. Figuring out how they work." She thought about that. "It's useful in court," she said. "It's more than that," he said. "You do it naturally. You did it at 17 too." She looked at him sharply. You noticed me at 17? He held her gaze. Yes. She processed this. She turned back to face the street ahead. You never said anything, she said. No, he said. She thought about asking why, and then she thought better of it, because there were things in the answer to that question that she was not sure either of them was ready to look at directly on a Thursday night after bowling. You picked up my pen once, she said. In the hallway. Second week of school. He went very still for exactly one step. Then he kept walking. I remember. I always wondered if you recognized me, she said. Or if I was just a stranger. He was quiet for long enough that she thought he might not answer. And then he said, quietly, you were never just a stranger to me. She did not say anything after that. Neither did he. Tund, ahead of them, finished his story and erupted into his own laughter, and Nadia joined him, and the street noise filled the space around them. And Stella walked the last block to her building with the particular feeling of someone who has just been told the answer to a question they stopped asking years ago. At the building door, she stopped and turned to say goodnight, and Hyuk was already looking at her. Same time next week, she said. The corner of his mouth. You're going to beat me at something else? Probably, she said. Then yes, he said. Same time next week. She went inside. She stood in her elevator and looked at nothing in particular and felt the kind of warmth in her chest that she had very deliberately not allowed herself to name. What she still did not know was that Park Chan had called his office 3 times in the past 2 weeks about the April timeline, and that his father had been in Seoul for 4 days, and that the conversation that had been coming since March had finally arrived. Kwon Sung-jin sat in the study of the family's Seoul residence and looked at his son the way he had looked at him since Hyuk was 12, the way you look at something that is functioning close to expectation and you are simply checking the tolerances. The announcement goes out Friday, his father said. The wedding is the 28th. Hyuk sat across from him and said nothing. Your silence, his father said, is not agreement. No, Hyuk said. It's not. His father set down his glass. You have something to say. I have been saying it, Hyuk said. For 2 months. I would like more time. Time for what? His father said. Not a question. A demand for precision. Hyuk looked at his father. He thought about a girl in a green dress at a wedding in Jeju, and a business card on a table, and a bowling alley where for 3 hours he had felt entirely and completely like a person rather than a function. He thought about a phone call that had lasted 40 minutes in a parked car, and another one that had gone until midnight, and a text sent at 11:30 that he had read 4 times before he replied. For something that matters, he said. His father looked at him for a long time. Chan matters, he said. The Park family matters. This arrangement represents 15 years of careful architecture. You are not going to dismantle it because of something that matters. Things that matter don't last. Arrangements do. Hyuk said with respect. Don't, his father said, which was the closest he ever came to raising his voice. Don't qualify it. If you have something to say it directly or don't say it. Hyuk was quiet. Friday, his father said. The announcement. He left the room. Hyuk sat in the study alone for a while, looking at nothing, running the arithmetic of a problem that did not have a clean solution. He had always been good at arithmetic. He had always found clean solutions. He was not sure, for the first time in his adult life, that one existed here. His phone was in his pocket. He did not take it out. He sat with the particular stillness of someone who has a decision in front of them that they have not yet made. Stella found out about the engagement announcement the same way everyone found out about things she had not been told, Tund. Specifically, Tund, who had been reading something on his phone at her kitchen table on a Saturday morning while she was making breakfast, and who went very quiet in a way that was not his usual kind of quiet. She looked at him. What? He turned his phone toward her. It was a news article. The headline was unambiguous. Kwon Hyuk, chairman of Kwon International's Asia-Pacific operations, and Park Chan, daughter of Senator Park Ji-won, to wed April 28th in what the article called the most significant social event of the spring season. There was a photograph. Kwon Hyuk and a woman standing together at some kind of function, both of them in formal clothes, both of them composed. Stella looked at the photograph for a few seconds. She put it face down on the counter and went back to making breakfast. Stella, Tund said. Eggs, she said. Stella. Tund, do you want eggs or not? He was quiet. Then, yes. Please. She made the eggs. She plated them. She sat down at the table across from him and ate in the methodical way she had been eating since childhood, the way her mother had called her the focused eater, each thing on the plate given its turn. She did not feel nothing. She wanted to be clear about that, even only to herself. She did not feel nothing. She felt the particular, careful feeling of someone who has managed their own expectations with precision and still finds, somehow, that they had not managed them quite well enough. She had known, at some level, that Kwon Hyuk existed in a world with rules she was not part of. She had known that the careful, quiet way he had been present in her life for the past few weeks was happening alongside other things she was not privy to. She was a lawyer. She understood the architecture of situations. She had not let herself build anything on a foundation she had not examined. But she had still, apparently, built something. You can say it, Tund said, gently. There's nothing to say, she said. You're allowed to be upset, he said. She looked at him. I'm not upset. You're eating your eggs in alphabetical order, he said. She looked down at her plate. She was, in fact, eating in a very specific sequence that she had not consciously decided on. She set down her fork. She looked at the table for a moment. I liked talking to him, she said. That's all. I liked talking to him, and I thought maybe. She stopped. She picked up her fork again. It doesn't matter. It clearly matters, Tund said. Drop it, she said. He dropped it. He was quiet across the table, and she was grateful, because Tund's silences, unlike most people's, did not feel like absence. They felt like company. Her phone was on the table. She did not look at it. It buzzed. She looked at it. The notification was from Kwon Hyuk. Not a text, a call. His name on her screen, with the timestamp of right now, this exact moment, as if he had known. She stared at it. Tund very carefully did not react. She picked it up. She stood from the table and walked to the window and answered it. I need to tell you something, Hyuk said, immediately. No preamble, no greeting. Just that, in the direct way that had always been him. I saw the article, she said. A pause. Longer than his pauses usually were. I'm sorry, he said. I should have told you before it was published. I knew it was coming. I didn't, he stopped. In the pause she heard something she had not heard from him before, the sound of a person who is choosing words more carefully than usual because the usual words are not enough. I didn't know how to tell you. Why not, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, because I did not want to lose this before I understood what it was. She stood at the window with the morning light coming through it and the sounds of her apartment around her and the weight of that sentence sitting exactly where it was meant to. Hyuk, she said. I know, he said. I know what it looks like. It looks like you're engaged to be married in 3 weeks, she said. Gently. But clearly. I haven't, he paused again. It's complicated. Uncomplicated, she said. She was not unkind about it. She was precise. Which was the same thing she was in court when the other side was being evasive, not angry, just clear. Explain it to me. He did. Not everything at once, not the full history, not the architecture of 15 years of his father's planning, but enough. Enough for her to understand the dimensions of the situation. A family arrangement that predated his adulthood. A marriage that was already public. A father who did not negotiate and a world that had been built around the assumption that Kwon Hyuk would comply. She listened the way she always listened, without interrupting, taking in each piece and placing it where it belonged. When he finished, she said, What do you want? He said, You know what I want. She looked out the window. The cherry blossoms were still on the trees. They would not be there much longer. Wanting something isn't enough, she said. Not for something like this. I know, he said. I'm not going to be the reason for anything, she said. I'm not going to be the thing you point to when you explain why you didn't do what your family expected. That's not a position I'm willing to be in. I know, he said again. Then what are you asking me, she said. A long pause. Longer than any of the others. I don't know yet, he said, and there was something in his voice when he said it, something that was not his usual careful steadiness, that told her he meant it. That the composure that had been so consistent, so unvarying, had a small, honest fracture in it right now. She closed her eyes for a moment. Figure it out, she said, quietly. And when you have, call me. She hung up. Tund was looking at her from the kitchen table when she came back. She sat down. She picked up her fork. She ate the rest of her eggs in no particular order. She did not hear from him for 4 days. She was not, she told herself, waiting. She was busy. She had a brief to finish and a meeting with a client who was the very particular kind of difficult that required absolute focus and zero emotional static. She worked. She slept. She ate meals at normal hours. She went for a run on the second day and a second run on the third day, which Tund noted was unusual for her and which she attributed to the weather being nice. On the fourth day, she came home to find Tund on her couch with his laptop and what appeared to be an entire meal laid out on her coffee table. You brought food to my apartment, she said. I brought food to our evening, he said. Sit down. She sat. He had ordered from the Korean-Nigerian fusion place they had discovered in February that they both agreed was either a genuine culinary breakthrough or a fever dream. She helped herself to a portion and ate, and they watched something neither of them had seen before, and it was comfortable and easy in the way only very long friendships were. You're okay, Tund said, at some point. Not a question. I'm always okay, she said. That's not what I asked, he said. She was quiet for a moment. I'm okay, she said. I mean it. He nodded. He did not press. At 10:17, her phone lit up with a text. She looked at it. Hyuk, I ended it. She stared at the screen. 3 words. Clean and exact, which was exactly how he said things. Tund, entirely without looking up from the show, said, Is that him? Yes, she said. What did he say? She turned the phone and showed him. Tund looked at the screen. He looked at her. He looked back at the screen. He set down his fork with great deliberateness. Stella. I know, she said. He called it off? That's what it says. Tund picked up his fork again and went back to eating with the focused composure of someone who had a lot of feelings and was choosing, wisely, not to deploy them all at once. He was quiet for almost a full minute. Then, you should text him back. I know, she said. Tonight, he said. Tund. I'm just saying. I know, she said. She texted him. She went to the kitchen to do it, which made no practical difference, but which felt right. She typed, that must have been very hard. He replied, it was necessary. She typed, how are you? He replied, honest answer? She typed, always. He replied, I've been better. I've also been worse. Right now I'm mostly relieved. She sat with that for a moment. She typed, come get food. My friend brought enough for 6 people. He replied, are you sure? She typed, you have 10 minutes or Tund eats your portion. He appeared at her door in 14 minutes, still in his work clothes, with his cap in his hand this time rather than on his head, which for some reason felt significant. Tund let him in with the simple grace of a man who had decided to be dignified about having called this outcome approximately 17 days ago. There's jollof rice, Tund said, and bibimbap, and something that I think is both at the same time. Both at the same time, Hyuk said, looking at the table. That's the fusion, Tund said. Sit. Eat. Don't make it weird. Hyuk sat. He looked at Stella. She looked at him. You ended it, she said. Not an accusation. Just making it real. Yes, he said. Your father. My father has opinions, he said. He will continue to have opinions. They are his to have. He held her gaze. I am 32 years old, and I have done every single thing that was asked of me. I have exactly one thing I am keeping for myself. She looked at him for a long time. Just one, she said. Something shifted in his expression, very quietly, In the way things shifted with him, no announcement, just a change in the quality of the stillness. "Just one," he said. Tund, across the coffee table, was eating his jollof bibimbap with the serene focus of a man who had completely removed himself from the conversation out of consideration, and who was absolutely, definitely, still listening to every word. Park Chan, for her part, did not take the news with tears. She took it with the composed precision of a woman who had known, on some level, that the thing they were building had never had the right materials, and who had decided, privately, that she deserved something with better ones. She was not, however, gracious about how it reached the press. 3 days after Hyuk ended the arrangement, someone no one could quite prove who, though Stella had her professional suspicions, sent a message to a gossip account with a considerable following, containing the information that Kwon Hyuk had called off the engagement and that the reason involved a woman. There was no name. There did not need to be. Seoul's social circles were not large, and Chan had a clique that had been trained since private school to find the seam in any story and pull. Stella heard about it from Nadia, who had seen the posts. She read 2 of them, decided they were not worth more of her time, and went back to work. What she did not manage to avoid was the lunch. Chan's circle had a habit of frequenting the same restaurant near the legal district where Stella's firm held client lunches twice a week. Stella was there on a Tuesday with a client when Chan walked in with 3 women who all moved with the synchronized confidence of a group that had rehearsed its own impressiveness. Stella registered it. She went back to her client. It was on her way out that Chan positioned herself, with architectural precision, directly in the path to the exit. She was smiling, which was the kind of smile that had no warmth in it whatsoever. "Stella Beatrice," she said, the way someone says a name when they want the sound of it to land like something. Stella stopped. She looked at Chan with the particular composure she reserved for opposing counsel who thought that personal provocation was a litigation strategy, which it sometimes was. It still didn't work. "Chan," she said, pleasantly. "I heard you've been spending time with Hyuk," Chan said. Her 2 friends on either side of her had the look of people bracing for a performance they had been anticipating. "I spend time with a lot of people," Stella said. "It's a busy season." "He ended a 10-year family arrangement," Chan said. "I thought you should know the kind of disruption you've caused." Stella looked at her steadily. "He made a decision," she said. "That was his to make. I didn't make it for him." "How convenient for you," Chan said. "Convenient isn't the word I'd choose," Stella said. "But I understand why you're angry. What happened was real, and it wasn't nothing, and you're allowed to be hurt by it." She paused, just briefly. "But if you're hoping that standing in my path is going to accomplish something, I want to be honest with you, it won't. I'm going to go back to work, and Hyuk is going to do whatever Hyuk decides, and the decision he made was not made out of disruption. It was made out of clarity." She adjusted her bag strap. "Take care of yourself." She walked past. Behind her, one of the friends said something she didn't catch. She didn't slow down. She was outside and already on her phone when Tund caught up with her. He had been waiting in the lobby, having correctly predicted that lunch would require decompression. "How was it?" he said. "Fine," she said. "You look like you said something very good," he said. "I said several things," she said. "Let's go." He fell into step beside her, and she could feel him vibrating with the restraint of someone who was not going to ask follow-up questions but wanted to very badly. "She's not the villain," Stella said, after a moment. "She's just someone who got handed a situation she didn't fully choose either." "You're very fair," Tun said. "I'm objective," she said. "That's the same thing," he said. "Not always," she said. She told Hyuk about the lunch that evening. Not dramatically, just factually, over the phone, sitting on her kitchen counter with a glass of water and the window open. He was quiet for a moment. "I'll speak to her," he said. "You don't need to," she said. "It was handled." "Stella." "It was handled," she said calmly. "I'm not fragile. I'm not going to need you to fight things that I can manage." Another pause. "I know you're not fragile," he said. "Good," she said. "Then stop making that face." "You can't see my face," he said. "I know what face you're making," she said. A beat. Then, very quietly, "You're probably right." "I'm always right," she said. "I'm a lawyer." He made a sound that was trying very hard not to be a laugh. It failed slightly. She counted it. His family was another matter. Kwon Sung-jin was not a man who accepted outcomes he had not sanctioned. The days following the announcement of the called-off engagement had produced a silence from the family that was not the comfortable kind. It was the kind that preceded something. Hyuk knew the pattern. He had grown up inside it. What he had not expected was his mother. She called him on a Thursday evening, and she talked to him, not at him, which was different, and knew enough that he sat down while it was happening. She said she was not going to tell him what to do. She said she had done that, or let it be done, for years, and she was tired. She said she had watched him grow up in a house where the entire purpose of growing up was to become useful, and that she had not done enough about that, and that she was sorry for it in a way she did not entirely know how to express. She said she wanted him to be happy, and that she had almost forgotten that was allowed to be a priority. She said she would talk to his father. Hyuk held the phone for a long time after she hung up. He was still holding it when it rang again. He looked at the screen. "Stella." He picked up. "I was just thinking about you," he said. "What a coincidence," she said. "I was thinking about calling you, and then I decided to just call you, which I think is progress for me." "It is," he said, and meant it. "Progress toward what?" "Toward not overanalyzing everything I do," she said. "I come from a family of cautious people. It's a genetic condition. There are worse ones," he said. "My sister," she said, "is not cautious at all. She decided she was going to be an actress the day she graduated from law school, because she passed the bar and then thought, well, now what? She's actually a very good actress. It's genuinely annoying." He smiled. It was easy here. With her. That was the thing he noticed every time, how easy it was, not in the uncomplicated sense, because nothing about this was uncomplicated, but in the sense of being in a room where you did not have to manage the temperature. "Do you get along with her?" "Most of the time," Stella said. "She's dramatic and she borrows my things without asking, and she once signed me up for a pottery class without telling me, and then was surprised when I showed up not knowing why I was there. But she's my sister. Of course I love her." He thought about this. He did not have siblings. He had always understood that as a fact, neutral and structural, the way you understand the layout of a building you grew up in. Hearing Stella describe her sister, the irritation and the love sitting right next to each other, neither canceling the other out, made him understand it differently. "Come to the firm's spring event," she said. Not quite a question. "When?" he said. "Next Friday," she said. "It's not formal. It's outdoors. Tund is making his jollof rice." "Tund is catering your firm's event," he said. "Nobody cooks like Tund," she said. "The partners know. It's an arrangement." He laughed. This time fully. "Yes," he said. "I'll come." "Good," she said. "And leave the cap at home. You work in Seoul. People know you exist." "They will stare," he said. "They'll get over it," she said. She hung up. He sat in the quiet of his apartment and looked at the ceiling for a while, the way he had not let himself look at ceilings, just upward, just breathing, not organizing or planning, in longer than he could accurately remember. The spring event was on a rooftop garden that belonged to a hotel 3 blocks from the firm. It was the kind of April evening that Seoul occasionally produced as an apology for February, warm and unhurried, the sun taking its time going down, everything smelling like the flowers that had appeared on every balcony and windowsill in the past 2 weeks. Hyuk arrived without the cap. People noticed. He had expected that. He was good at letting things happen without reacting, and he stood with Stella's firm colleagues and listened to the conversations they were having and contributed when he had something worth saying and was quiet when he didn't, which was the way he functioned everywhere, and which people who had not met him often mistook for coldness, and people who had met him understood was simply economy. Tund's jollof rice was, as promised, extraordinary. Hyuk had 2 servings, which Tund noticed and approved of with the nod of a man who took food seriously and respected people who did the same. You're going to be okay, Tun said to him at one point, quietly, while they were both at the food table and Stella was across the garden talking to two partners. Hyuk looked at him. What do you mean? With her, Tun said. You're going to be okay with her. He paused. I'm telling you, not asking. She doesn't talk about it, she barely talks about any of it, but I've known her for 7 years, and I know what it looks like when she's decided something matters. He picked up a serving spoon and pointed it gently in Stella's direction. That's it. Right there. When she's paying attention and not performing the attention. That's the real thing. Hyuk looked across the garden. Stella was laughing at something one of the partners had said. She caught his eye across the distance, briefly, and something in her expression shifted, just a degree or two, the way a light changes when a cloud moves, barely perceptible unless you were looking for it. He was always looking for it. I know, Hyuk said. Tund put the serving spoon down. Good, he said. Now eat your rice. The sleepover was Nadia's idea, which it usually was when something was someone's bad idea. It was not a bad idea, strictly speaking. It was a gathering at Stella's apartment on a Saturday, the kind that started as 5 people coming for dinner and ended, as these things did, with everyone too comfortable and too deep into conversation to leave at a reasonable hour. Blankets were acquired. The couch was occupied. Tund fell asleep in the armchair at some point with the plush penguin, which had been living at Stella's apartment since the bowling alley, balanced on his armrest, and no one disturbed him because he looked very peaceful. Hyuk was on the couch, at Stella's invitation, which had been extended over text with the exact casualness of someone trying very hard to be casual about something they were not entirely casual about. He had accepted with equal care. It was around 1 a.m, with the lights low and the conversation having meandered into the kind of aimless, comfortable territory that long nights produced, that Tund had rearranged himself in the armchair without fully waking up, and in doing so had somehow come to be half-draped towards Stella's side, his arm ending up loosely across hers in the way unconscious sleep architecture occasionally produced between people who had known each other long enough. Hyuk was not asleep. He was very still, which was his version of the opposite of sleep, and he was looking at the ceiling, and he was also aware, in the specific, pointed way of someone who is pretending not to be aware, that Tun's arm was across Stella's. He looked at it for approximately 30 seconds. He got up, quietly, not making it a production, picking up the blanket that had been on his section of the couch and folding it, because he was someone who folded things, and setting it on the armrest, and making his way toward the door. He was putting on his shoes when he heard, from behind him, "Where are you going?" He turned. Stella was standing in the hallway, her blanket around her shoulders, looking at him with the calm, clear eyes that never missed anything. "It's late," he said. "I didn't want to wake anyone." "You weren't asleep," she said. He looked at her. She looked back. She was trying, he could see it, not to smile. She was not entirely succeeding. "He does that," she said. "Tund. He migrates in his sleep. He's done it since we were junior associates sharing a hotel room at a conference, and I woke up to find his arm across my face." Hyuk stood very still. "He's like a golden retriever," she said. "He just ends up on top of people. It doesn't mean anything. It never has." Hyuk looked at the floor for a moment. Then at her. "I wasn't." "You were," she said, gently. Not as an accusation. As a fact. He did not deny it. She walked to the door and stood next to him, close enough that he could see the edge of her expression clearly in the low light from the hallway. She looked at him. He looked at her. The apartment was quiet around them, full of sleeping people, and the city outside was making its nighttime sounds, and there was no particular reason for either of them to say anything. "Don't go," she said. 2 words. Quiet and direct, which was exactly how she said everything. He looked at her face for a moment, the seriousness of it, the warmth underneath the seriousness. The way those 2 things lived together in her, and had lived together since she was 17 and walked into a classroom and changed the entire frequency of a room she didn't even know she was changing. He reached up and tucked one loose piece of hair behind her ear, carefully, the way you handle something you have been careful about for a very long time. Okay, he said. She leaned, very slightly, into the touch. Her eyes closed for a moment. When they opened again, she was looking at him with an expression that he recognized, in the way you recognize something you have not seen before, but have imagined in enough detail that it feels familiar. Okay, she said. They went back to the couch. He sat at one end, she sat at the other, and the space between them closed over the next 40 minutes in the unhurried way that things close when they are closing correctly. Until she had fallen asleep against his shoulder, and he was sitting very still with his arm around her and looking at nothing in particular, thinking nothing in particular, simply present, in a way that he had not been simply present in longer than he wanted to calculate. Tund opened one eye. He looked at the couch. He saw what he saw. He closed his eye again and went back to sleep with the serene satisfaction of a man whose work, for tonight, was done. The days that followed had a different quality to them. Not dramatic, not announced, just different, the way your apartment is different after you rearrange one piece of furniture. Everything is in roughly the same place, but the whole room has a new logic. She still worked long hours. He still read the legal section of every publication. They still texted in the early morning and the late evening, and the calls still lasted longer than either of them planned. And Tund still provided running commentary that she pretended to find irritating and that she actually found deeply comforting because it meant someone who loved her had watched the whole thing and approved of how it was going. His father had not spoken to him since the week the engagement was called off. His mother sent him things of food delivery, once, and a message that simply said she was thinking of him, which was more than she had managed in his entire childhood and which meant, because of that, considerably more than it would have from anyone else. He was sitting in his office on a Wednesday afternoon when the call came in. Not his father. His father's assistant, which was worse, in a way, because it meant the response was being administered rather than given. The meeting was set for the following evening. The family residence. His father, his mother, and, apparently, a representative from the Park family's legal team, which told Hyuk everything he needed to know about how formally his father intended to handle this. He texted Stella, "My father has called a meeting." She replied, "How bad?" He replied, "They've brought lawyers." She replied, "I'm a lawyer." He looked at his phone. He replied, "I know." She replied, "I'm not offering to represent you. I'm just reminding you that I understand what that means and that lawyers in a room don't automatically mean a worse outcome." He replied, "You're trying to make me feel better." She replied, "I'm trying to give you accurate information. It happens to also make you feel better. That's incidental." He looked at the text for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone and called her. She answered on the second ring. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Go ahead," she said. 10 years ago, he said, on the last day of school, I was in the back seat of my father's car, and we drove out of the school, and I looked back, and you were standing with your family. And I watched you for as long as I could." He paused. "And I thought, before the car turned, I thought, maybe, just maybe, you felt it too." The line was quiet for a moment. "I did," she said. He closed his eyes for a second. "I felt someone watching me," she said. "That whole last week. And on the last day I looked around for it and I couldn't find it. And it bothered me more than I let myself admit." "I'm sorry," he said. "For the 10 years. You don't need to apologize for time," she said. "It just was what it was. It went how it went. And here we are." "Here we are," he said. Another quiet. Not empty. The kind that was full of things that did not need to be said right now because they would be said, eventually, when the time was right, and both of them were people who understood the patience of that. "Go to the meeting," she said. "Tell your father the truth. Not about me, about yourself. About what you want and why." She paused. "He might not change. But you'll have said it, and you'll know that you said it. And if he doesn't change," he said, "then you make your decisions with the information you have," she said. "Which is what you do. Which is what I've seen you do." Another pause. You are not the first child of a difficult family who had to figure out where the arrangement ended and where they began. You won't be the last. But you're one of the ones who figured it out, and that is not nothing. He sat with that. You're very good at this, he said. Being right, she said. Saying the thing that needs to be said, he said. Without making it bigger than it is, or smaller. It's a skill, she said. Some people are born with it. I studied for mine. No, he said. That one you were born with. A pause. He heard, very faintly, the sound of her pressing her lips together. The way she did when something landed and she was deciding whether to let it show. Go to the meeting, she said, again, softly. I will, he said. And text me after, she said. I will, he said. Good night, Stella Beatrice. Good night, Kwon Hyuk. The meeting was what it was. His father was composed in the way that had always been his composure, entirely controlled. Not a single thing given away that was not intended to be given. The Park family's representative sat to the side and said very little, which meant he was there as a reminder, not an actor. His mother sat across the table and looked at her husband, and then at her son, and then at her hands, and she said nothing, but she was there, which was more than she had managed before. Hyuk spoke. He said what Stella had told him to say, not about her, but about himself. He said that the arrangement had been built on the assumption that he would grow into the shape his father had cut out for him, and that he had, in almost every respect, done that. He said the one thing he could not do was marry someone he had never chosen, and that doing it would produce exactly the kind of outcome his father's architecture was designed to prevent, something structurally unsound, built on a foundation that had never been tested. His father looked at him for a very long time after he finished. You have thought about this, his father said. Yes, Hyuk said. For how long? Hyuk looked at him. Longer than you know, he said. Another silence. The Park representative shifted slightly in his chair. His father said, the Kwon name. The Kwon name, Hyuk said, has survived every decision I have made in the past 12 years. I have not been reckless. I have not been impulsive. I have not given you any reason to question my judgment. In 12 years of running this company, that turned out to be wrong. He held his father's gaze. I am asking you to extend the same trust to this. His mother made a sound. Very small. But she made it. His father looked at his wife. Then back at his son. The particular calculation that his father's silences always contained was happening. Hyuk could see it in the set of his jaw, the measured nothing of his expression. I will not support it, his father said, finally. I want that on record. I will not support what you are choosing. I understand, Hyuk said. But I will not block it, his father said. I am not your jailer. His mother looked up. His father rose from the table. He straightened his jacket. He was, for just a moment, just one, looking at his son not with the evaluating gaze of an executive chairman, but with something that was harder to name and harder to maintain, and which was gone in the next breath. He left the room. Hyuk sat at the table for a moment. His mother reached across and put her hand on his briefly, just briefly, and then withdrew it and rose and followed his father out. The Park representative gathered his papers and left without a word. Hyuk sat alone in his family's dining room, in the house he had grown up in, and let the silence be silence for a few minutes. Then he took out his phone. He texted Stella, "It's done." She replied in 30 seconds, "How are you?" He replied, "Same as last time." Relieved. "Tired." "Okay." She replied, "Same answer, same question." "Should I be concerned about the pattern?" He replied, "No. It means things are resolving in a consistent direction." She replied, "That's either optimism or data analysis." He replied, "Both." She replied a moment later with nothing verbal, just a single small image, a photo she had taken from what looked like her kitchen window, the city at night, the lights of Seoul laid out beyond the glass. No caption. He looked at it for a long moment. He replied, "Beautiful." She replied, "It is." The conversation about his family happened once, properly, about 2 weeks later. Not in an apartment or over a phone. They were at an aquarium. Tund had found it, because Tund found everything, and had announced that they were all going on a Saturday because he had read that aquariums were good for the nervous system, and everyone in their circle had nervous systems that required attention. The aquarium was not the kind of place Hyuk had been to in a long time. Possibly ever, in the way he was experiencing it now, not as something to organize or be seen at, but simply as a place with dark corridors and blue-lit tanks and enormous fish moving through the water with the slow authority of things that had been doing this for millions of years. They had separated from the group at some point, neither of them announcing it, simply finding themselves at the end of a quieter corridor in front of a tank that held a kind of jellyfish that moved the way things move in dreams, boneless and illuminated, going wherever the current suggested. He said he won't support it, Hyuk said. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the jellyfish. But he didn't block it, she said. She had been standing next to him when he said it, not having asked. No, he said. She nodded slowly. The blue light from the tank moved across her face as the jellyfish drifted past. I need you to know something, she said. He looked at her. I don't need his approval, she said. I am not going to chase it or earn it or try to convince him of anything. That's not something I'm available to do. She held his gaze steadily. But I want you to know that whatever comes with this, whatever his version of tolerance looks like, I'm not going anywhere because it's difficult. I have dealt with difficult before. She paused. I just needed you to hear that from me directly. So there's no ambiguity. He looked at her in the blue light for a long moment. There's no ambiguity, he said. Good, she said. The jellyfish drifted past them again, going nowhere in particular, entirely comfortable with that. I'm going to need you, he said, very quietly, to not be this reasonable all the time. It makes it difficult to have reasonable concerns about things. She looked at him. What concerns? About whether this is real, he said. About whether 10 years of watching someone from a distance produces an actual person or just a version of one. He said it with the directness he always had, unpolished, without softening it into something more comfortable. I know you. I am learning you. And I am aware every day that there is a difference. She was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that was thinking rather than hesitation. There is a difference, she said. And I have the same one. I am learning you. She turned slightly so she was facing him rather than the tank. I think that's the only honest thing. Not that we know each other already. Not that it was always leading here. Just, we're learning. And it's worth learning. He looked at her face in the aquarium light. Worth it, he said. Not a question. Worth it, she said. From somewhere further back in the corridor came the sound of Tund, loudly, explaining to Nadia why the manta ray they were looking at was obviously the most intelligent animal in the entire building, and Nadia's laughter, which carried even through 2 corridors of aquarium. Stella looked back at the tank. Hyuk looked at her. He took her hand. She let him. His mother called 2 days later and asked if she could meet Stella. Hyuk told Stella that evening. There was a pause on her end. Not long. She asked herself? She called me, he said. This morning. She said she wanted to understand. Another pause. All right, Stella said. He blinked. Just like that. Just like that, she said. She reached out herself. She gets a meeting. She paused. I'm not going to make this harder than it is, Hyuk. If she comes with something real, I'll meet it with something real. He thought about all the things he had expected her to say, and how none of them were what she said, and how that was the pattern consistently, reliably, the pattern. You're remarkable, he said. She made a sound that was specifically designed to communicate that she was not going to be moved by that. It did not entirely work. Set it up, she said. Somewhere public. And not tea. Not tea, he confirmed. And tell her I take my time, she said. I'm not making any decisions before I'm ready. She should know that. I'll tell her, he said. The meeting happened at a gallery because Stella liked galleries and his mother had once, before the years of being a Kwan, liked them too, which was something Hyuk had not known until he suggested it and his mother had said yes immediately, which told him something. They spent an hour among Korean contemporary painters and said things that were partly about art and partly about everything else, the way conversations in galleries often worked, and it was not warm yet, exactly, but it was the first step toward warm, and that was enough. His mother, on the way out, had stopped and looked at Stella and said, "He has been patient in ways I did not teach him. I think that is something he learned alone." She had paused. "He is worth patience in return. I believe you know that." Stella had looked at her directly. "I do," she said. His mother had nodded. She had looked for a moment, like someone who had wanted to say something for a very long time and was only now finding the right room for it. She did not say anything else. But she did not need to. The question of Miami came, like most things between them, without preamble. They were in his car, he was driving, no driver, which was itself something. Because Kwon Hyuk with a driver was one version of the man, and Kwon Hyuk behind the wheel on a Saturday afternoon with no destination specified was something that existed now and had not existed a year ago. She had her window cracked and her shoes off and her feet on the dashboard, which she had started doing around week 6, because she had decided that if they were going to be in his car regularly, she was going to be comfortable in it. And he had never said a word about it except to note, once, that she had left a scuff, which she denied. "Miami," he said. She looked at him. "What about it?" "I have never been," he said. She looked at the road ahead. "You've never been to Miami?" "I've been through it," he said. "For a conference." "I didn't see it." She thought about this. She paused, gathering the right words. "It's very much itself. More than almost anywhere. The color of it. The sound of it. The water." She turned to look at him. "You would either love it or find it completely overwhelming." "Which do you think?" he said. She studied his profile for a moment. "Love it," she said. "Definitely love it." He nodded slowly, watching the road. "Next month." She looked at him. "Next month, Miami?" "Unless you have a case," he said. She thought about her calendar. She thought about her firm, and her cases, and Tund, who would be insufferably happy about this development. She thought about Miami, which she had been to twice, and which both times had done something to her: the light off the water, the color of the buildings at dusk, the specific sound of the city at night, which was different from every other city's night sound. "I'll clear the week," she said. "A week is a lot," he said. "Miami deserves a week," she said. "If you're seeing it properly for the first time." He looked at her, briefly, the way he looked at things he wanted to remember exactly. Then he looked back at the road. "A week," he said. "A week," she said. She put her feet back on the dashboard. He did not comment on the scuff. She settled into the seat the way she had settled into things with him, without announcing it, without making it larger than it needed to be, just settling, because settling was the right word for it, and she was done pretending otherwise. Miami in early summer was everything she had described and a few things she had not anticipated, which were the best parts. The light came off Biscayne Bay in the early morning in a way that made even someone accustomed to being unmoved by light stand at the window of a hotel and look at it for longer than was strictly necessary. The restaurants were what she had promised. The music that drifted from somewhere every evening, impossible to identify the exact source of, was exactly the kind of ambient warmth that made you feel that whatever you were carrying when you arrived could be set down for a while. They ate at a place on the water that had no printed menu, where everything was written on a blackboard and changed daily, and he ate 3 things he had not had before and pronounced all 3 of them worth having again. They argued, briefly but genuinely, about directions, because he trusted a map and she trusted instinct, and they were both right about different things, which was probably a metaphor for something neither of them cared to examine on vacation. They walked along the beach in the evening when the sand was cool enough and the water was the color of something that should not be real. She found a bookshop and spent 45 minutes in it while he sat outside on a bench and read something on his phone and did not once suggest they leave, which was a thing she noticed and catalogued. On the last evening, they had dinner at a restaurant where the tables were outside and the sky went slowly dark while they ate, the stars appearing one at a time as if the night was pacing itself. The food was excellent. The conversation was easy, the kind of easy that had been earned rather than assumed. At some point in the meal, she looked at him across the table. This man she had noticed at 17 and not spoken to and not found again for 10 years and found again at a wedding in Jeju in a room full of flowers. And she thought about all the ways it could have not happened. The particular coincidences that had needed to coincide. The timing that had needed to be exactly this and not slightly different. The business card on a table. The 3 weeks she had waited to text, sitting on a bathroom floor. The bowling alley and the racing game, and the night everyone fell asleep except the two of them. She thought about how many people carry something around for years without knowing what to do with it, and how many of them never find the right moment, and how she had been given one and had taken it. "What are you thinking about?" he said. Not performing the question. Just asking, the way he asked things. She looked at him. 10 years, she said. He held her gaze. "We wasted them," she said. Not with regret, with the matter-of-fact quality of someone stating a fact and then choosing what to make of it. And we didn't waste them. It was both. Both, he agreed. If it had happened at 17, she said, I don't know that I was ready. I was ambitious and I was focused, and I would have been a very difficult person to love at 17. She picked up her glass. I'm still a difficult person, but I know now what I'm difficult about. That's all anyone can ask, he said. And you, she said. At 17? He thought about it honestly, the way he thought about most things. At 17, I was obedient, he said. I knew what I wanted, and I did not believe I was allowed to have it. That is not a good version of a person to be in a relationship. He paused. I needed 10 years too. I just did not know I was spending them on that. She nodded slowly. The water beyond the terrace was dark now, the lights of the city catching the surface in moving pieces. Here we are, she said, for the second time. The same words as months ago on the phone, but different in the way they landed. More settled. Here we are, he said. He reached across the table. She did not hesitate. The night air was warm and the music from somewhere nearby was soft and the sky was clear all the way to the edges, and there was no plan for the next hour, which was unusual for both of them, and which was, for exactly that reason, exactly right. She looked at him across the table, this man who had watched her from a distance at 17 and then spent 10 years becoming the kind of person who could put the watching away and simply be present, and she thought, yes, this. Here. Not an ending. Not an arrival at some final station. Just the right moment, in the right city, at the right table, with the right person. And both of them were ready for it.
And that's where we are going to stop for today. So ladies, drop a comment telling me who is your favorite character of the story. If you haven't subscribed yet, come on, are you kidding me? You're missing a lot. Go back and check out other previous videos and make sure to like, comment and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching to this point. Take your flowers. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.